All right, it is now 6:30. So the authority for conducting a meeting electronically, October 22nd, 2020, for the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee. In emergency order number 12, issued by the governor of the state of New Hampshire pursuant to executive order number 2020-4, certain provisions of RSA 91A regulating the operation of public body meetings have been waived during the declared COVID-19 state of emergency. Specifically, the requirement that a quorum of a public body be physically present except in an emergency requiring immediate action under RSA 91-A:2, Roman 3, small b. The requirement that each part of a meeting of a public body be audible or otherwise discernible to the public at the location specified in the meeting notice as the location of the meeting under RSA 91-A:2, Roman 3c. Provided, however, that the public body must provide access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means, provide public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting, provide a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access, and adjourn the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. All votes are to be taken by roll call. All board participants shall identify the location from where they are participating and who is present in the room with them. To access the meeting online, navigate to zoom.us and enter the webinar ID number 864-6375-3809. To access the meeting via telephone, call 888-475-4499 or 877-853-5257 and enter the meeting webinar ID number 864-6375-3809. If you wish to comment, press *9. If you encounter any issues accessing this meeting, please call 603-757-622 during the meeting. The information on how to join the meeting will be posted periodically on the screen by Cheshire TV. This meeting is being televised live on Cheshire TV channel 1303. The video is posted on the city website by the end of the next business day, barring any technical difficulties. Anyone wishing to view a copy of the agenda and supporting materials will find it on the city website. To receive electronic copies of future agenda packets, please go to the city's homepage and subscribe. Once a motion has been made and seconded, only the members of the committee or the public may address the motion. Written comments from the public will also be accepted at the city clerk's office until Tuesday at 1 p.m. This meeting of the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee is now called to order. Starting with Councilor Remy, please state your name as well as your location and whether or not there's anyone else in the room with you.
It's Councilor Remy. I am home and alone.
Councilor Clark, I'm home alone.
Councilor Powers, I'm in council chambers.
Councilor Hooper, I'm home in a room alone.
All right, thank you. We have 4 members. We have a quorum. And we have an agenda of 4 items this evening. The first is the Colonial Theater Group requesting a transfer of land. City attorney or city manager want to open this, or we go right to it?
Well, I think that it would be appropriate to go to the applicant first to have a understanding, and then staff can respond.
All right. Tad, if you would you introduce it to us, please?
Yep, I'd be happy to. Thank you for having us this evening. I'm actually going to ask Alec Doyle, the executive director of the Colonial, just to give a little background about the project so you understand what's trying to be accomplished. And then I'll get into the details about the request for the transfer of land. So I think Alec will just take a minute or two to give you some background.
Okay. Thank you. Can you all hear me? Good, thanks. Thank you for listening to us tonight. I'll be brief. I think a lot of folks on this call are very familiar with the Colonials project. There are essentially 3 major elements. There's a new venue which is nearing completion as we speak behind us, a renovated existing building. And there are two large pieces being renovated in the Colonial itself, the front of house and the rear of house. Tonight, we really are, I guess, focused on the back of house, the stage house. The stage house is the most important piece of our operations, in that everything that goes on in the building has to happen in that space or be supported by that space. And at present, we have it's a lovely space constructed in 1924 with technology from the late 1800s, and neither the size nor the equipment therein can accommodate current touring productions effectively. So that means that we need to expand the size of the deck and the stage house, and also make improvements to the structure in order to support staging equipment and the like, which requires the hoisting of a lot more weight than we can possibly do right now. So I think that's the sort of basis of our rationale behind the expansion and the conversation tonight. And I'd be glad to answer any other questions.
Questions from the committee?
So this is Tad. I'll jump back in and just sort of get into the details for you then, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah, so Alec has described, the need for the expansion at the back of house of the Colonial Theater. And in order to accomplish that and to meet all of our programmatic goals, the design has taken us to the property lines. So the addition is now to the property lines. And this is the exterior face of the building. And that's allowed in the central business district. But the challenge we've run into is, so you build a building that the face of the building is on the property line, but then you have foundations below the ground that actually have to extend outside of that line. And in order to be able to do that, we are now requesting from the city of Keene a transfer of land for the things that will be below ground. We've spent time with both community development and public works, and I see Cord is on the call, so he can obviously add any comments that he would like to. But as we went through the process and discussed what was the most appropriate approach, we determined that a transfer of land would make the most sense. And so that's why we're here this evening to request. It's approximately 3 feet of land on both the western side of the Colonial property and the northern side into the commercial parking lots. You should have a diagram that depicts that for you. Basically, that grayed out area shows the area that we're requesting, and it's approximately 375 square feet. And because the land itself, is small and, serves little purpose right now, we're requesting or offering a dollar for that land for the transfer. We understand that there's, value there, but we also think that, it may be appropriate to request that, that approach. So that's the background and some of the detail. And there's some other information in the letter about the, finalizing the details with the appropriate people and working with the city in order to make that happen. But our goal this evening is really to make sure that you understand our request and answer questions and go from there.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from members of the committee? Any other city councilors online? Any members of the public wish to comment? All right. Mr. City Attorney, I assume that all the legal portions of this have been put together or will be put together by the time it's finalized?
Mr. Chairman?
I was going to say what it would be appropriate to ask the Public Works Director to speak to this, but the answer to the chairman's question is yes, before the shovels hit the ground, we'll have all of the paperwork.
Okay. Court?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Court Blomquist, Public Works Director, Emergency Management Director. Thank you for getting the opportunity. Certainly, I think as the council and the committee heard from Mr. Doyle and also Tad Trans, of course, the Colonials project has been going on for some time. The committee may remember as part of the council, about a month ago, you approved a number of licenses that were associated with the project. as Tad talked to you about, as he mentioned in the central business zone, property owners are permitted to build to the property line. As Tad has indicated, of course, part of the building construction is the construction of the foundation. This particular issue of extension onto our property is also on the other side. They have to work with the adjacent private property owner. They'll have to work with them to get the necessary rights to do this. Certainly, we did put the Colonial through the paces. I certainly will take a little umbrage about saying that the land is not necessarily used for the city. It's part of the commercial street, part of the commercial street parking lot. So the city acquired it for certainly a purpose, but certainly the amount of space I think we're talking about is fairly de minimis. And then we'll also be retaining our right-of-way easement over the top of the land after they get done with their construction of foundations. As I indicated, staff did put the Colonial through a little bit of their paces to make sure that their foundation design was the only way that they could do their project. Certainly, as those in their background will know, you can pretty much design anything. But certainly there are things that are more efficient and more cost efficient. We did put them through the paces, and they did come back and they did provide their design rationale and the appropriateness of their particular design of the foundation that they are doing. As indicated, it is about 300 plus or minus square feet along both the north side and the west side. As Tad did indicate, that there will be additional steps that they will need to do. They will need to do a formal survey, so that we know exactly how much land will be transferred, and also a boundary line adjustment through the planning board, because of course they will need to add this piece of new property to their property, and of course our property will need to be reduced by that particular amount. And for all those reasons, certainly the request for the purchase of the dollar certainly is certainly appropriate if you take into consideration the expense that they will have to do the other work. Certainly, as the city attorney did indicate, the transfer will be subject to the city manager and certainly city attorney's review of all forms and documents to ensure that they are correct. And also, too, we will be conditioning it on them receiving a similar permission from the property owner to the south. But certainly, if they don't get that particular approval to do that, they won't be able to, again, build the design that they currently have. So again, I believe you have a motion in front of you that does recommend the manager be given the authority to negotiate and execute the transfer of the property.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else to contribute to that discussion? All right. Committee members are going to need a motion.
City Manager, did you have anything to say? Okay, thank you. I just wanted to double check. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Finance Organization and Personnel Committee moves to recommend the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute the transfer of land within the commercial parking area to the Colonial Theater Group to support the Colonial Theater renovation/addition project.
Councilor Clark seconds.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion by the committee? All right, hearing none. Go for a roll call vote, please.
Councilor Remy, yes.
Councilor Clark, yes.
Councilor Powers, yes.
Councilor Hooper, yes.
All right, unanimous vote. Thank you very much. Second item on the agenda is a presentation, Cheshire TV Annual Report. So, and part of the discussion we have every year with Cheshire TV is that they present us with their annual report, and all of the members of the council have been provided one, and questions can be raised this evening, or we can present them at a later point. The manager has reviewed this, and I believe had a discussion with the president of the board at this point in time, who I believe is joining us by Zoom. Elizabeth, did you want to start off?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did review the annual report that was provided. Unfortunately, Jodi and I haven't had a conversation, but I did send her several questions in advance and via email. And hopefully, if she's not able to answer some of those tonight, she can certainly respond to me at a later time. Or if there are additional questions that come out of this evening, be happy to follow up directly with her after.
Okay. Questions from our committee members first. Any member of the committee have a question?
Are we going to hear from Jodi?
Yeah, we are, but I wanted to maybe get the questions out first, but.
Well, yeah, I have like several questions, but probably I'd really like to have her go over her report before.
Okay.
So that we don't duplicate them, and maybe she'd answer some of them and I wouldn't have to ask them. I guess my main question though is, this is an operating budget that's being presented to us from July 1st of 2020. And I was wondering when this budget was approved by the board.
Okay. Let's make sure Jodi's on.
I am on.
Okay.
So the budget has not been approved. We have gone through a lot of changes at Cheshire TV, and I had been in conversation with Elizabeth to let her know that we were in the process of doing everything that we were supposed to do. We were waiting for our audited statement, and we now have that, and we will be bringing it to the board in November on our next meeting, which is November 10th.
Okay.
So I did state that the annual report is a draft. I also found out this afternoon that some of the numbers are going to be changing. I was not aware of this, but somebody else probably was, that there is going to be an increase in our lease payment and some of our heating payments. So it's all fine. I apologize, but there are going to be some updates that are going to need to be made. Does that answer your question, Terry?
Yes, it does. But you are going to give us an oral
updated. I will give you an oral report as well as an updated version once we have our meeting.
Well, I'm just wondering if you're going to give us a report tonight, or if you're just presenting this and just leaving it for us to ask questions about it.
No, I can provide a report. I was going to give a little bit of a history of Cheshire TV just because I wasn't sure that everyone is aware and is familiar with Cheshire TV and its history.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if you would, I would reserve my questions until after Jodi is finished.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Go ahead with your oral report, please.
Okay, thank you so much. In 2004, a study was made by the City of Keene to decide whether they should establish a PEG channel. And the decision was made, and Cheshire TV, I believe, began in 2005. So that's been about 15 years. And through that time, until 2014, Lee Perkins had been the executive director. And at that time, a decision was made that Lee would be leaving and that Mark Nelson, Dave Kirkpatrick, and Rick Blood would have their own authority on specific topics and tasks, and that Mark Nelson would be considered the executive director. In 2014 also, Lee was given a camera setup as payment in lieu of money for being a consultant for 1 year. In 2015, the board approved a $5,000 payment for Lee to be a consultant for 1 more year. And that, as far as I can see, is the last time that Lee Perkins was part of Cheshire TV. Or at least that's what I thought. In 2019, the Cheshire TV office was moved back from the library annex back to the location that it is in now, the second story of the Masonic building, and life has gone on. So let me give you a little bit of an idea of who I am and why I'm interested in Cheshire TV. I was interviewed by Tracy Perkins about 13 years ago. And at that point, I thought, wow, this is a great process, to have a station like this available to the public to be able to pass on information. In 2008, or approximately, I started producing my own shows. And so I was observant in how things were run at Cheshire TV, but I was never a board member. I was someone who produced and borrowed equipment. In 2019, I was asked to join the board. And so I finally agreed. It wasn't the first time they had asked me to join the board, but I joined the board after being voted in, and that was in October. Within 2 months, Mark Nelson had offered his resignation, and it was apparent that things were not great at Cheshire TV. There was a lot of turmoil, a lot of disgruntlement, and the board took this into consideration. When we've had a few things change throughout the summer. In 2020, Tom Cook, our longtime board member, was taken ill. And at that point, there was nothing put in place as to what would happen in the absence of our as of our board chair. So we waited for Tom to respond, to let us know that he was either going to stay on or leave. And in May, we assigned a new board chair after Tom's resignation in April. And Tom Travers was put into place as the board chair. And that was at the July 7th meeting. And then July 14th, I was placed as the board chair. Tom Travers was placed as the executive director. And at the July 7th meeting, Mark Nelson's resignation was accepted, as he had given his resignation back in January or before. And it was made, a decision was made at will to terminate Dave Kirkpatrick's employment with Cheshire TV. When I came on as the board chair, I wanted to make sure that all of the board was receiving all of the emails. And as I was reviewing this in our Google list, I noticed that Lee Perkins was on our list. Lee Perkins is not the executive director. He was not a director. He wasn't even a member at these times before. And when we found this out, we took his name off the list. And this is where we have had quite a bit of problem. I can go into this as much as you'd like, but I really don't want to go into it a whole lot tonight unless you'd like me to, and I can answer any questions that you might have. But by joining the board is supposed to be an oversight board. We're supposed to make sure that the staff has what it needs and to make logical decisions. And I feel like the board is responsible, and it doesn't mean that everything that happened in the past should be on our shoulders, because I believe that a lot of decisions that were made in the past or that weren't made in the past may have led us to where we are now. One of the sayings that I really like to listen to is, it's always the right time to do the right thing, by Martin Luther King. And I've asked myself several times, why am I interested in being on this board when we are going through so much turmoil? Our day-to-day work is done. We are complying with all of the regulations and the requests as far as we can see with the city and with the town of Swansea. And I've understood that complaints have been made to the city, which I'm happy to address. But I believe that a lot of this is hearsay, and a lot of assumptions have been made without true facts. At this point, it just feels like it's a time of change in the culture of Cheshire TV. Our mission at Cheshire TV exists to encourage citizens to exercise their right to free speech and to foster awareness of their community through democratic use of electronic media by providing access to cable television and for the purpose of non-commercial communication within the community. We encourage community involvement in the production of local access programming while maintaining a friendly, open, and creative environment that will allow individual ideas to develop into collaborative productions. Maintaining an educational setting for Cheshire TV volunteers in an effort to advance their knowledge in the area of local access television production and to encourage the creation of unique programs to share within our community. We do this now, but we can do a lot better job. As part of the responsibilities for Cheshire TV, we are supposed to offer training, offer access to production resources, and offer broadcast time for the public and educational governmental access channels. These resources are available for production and presentation of programming of interest to the community. Residents of Keene and Swansea, as well as organizations and institutions within our affiliated and within the community, are welcome to and encouraged to use these resources. The nature of access programming is that everyone in the community has equal access to the facilities and channel time. We plan to continue to work with students in the area, and this is an area where I'd really like to see us expand. We also, let's see, as I said before, we returned from the annex or now we are in the new building. And I believe that this is a positive part. It was really hard, I believe, for the staff to be in the temporary location. I saw a lot of frustration, competitive ideas, and just a lot of stress in that area. I believe that we can re-present ourselves to the members and to the public. We'd like to continue, and as the school year begins, we would like to promote the scholarship that we have. We have 2 scholarships for $500 for active members of Cheshire TV. And then before I get into the financials, I'd just like to say that part of our plan for the future is to staff our operation with dedicated people who possess the unique combination of a passion for our mission, a long-term view of opportunities, a background or strong interest in media, and a willingness to do the hard work that it takes to guarantee success in our unique niche. We will combine this with constant training and education to our staff, professional development, and keeping up to date with industry standards and practices without regard to our size or scope of operation. As I mentioned today, I received a phone call from Andy Bohannon that our rent will be going up, which is fine. It still is within what we can afford in our budget. But this was something that apparently was told to Mark, and I was told to Tom Travers. But from what I see, the information that got to Tom Travers was after a date when he was let go. So I will update our operation budget for the upcoming season and increase the amount of fuel and the amount of rent that we will be paying. So this increases our budget by about $600. We also have a capital expenditure budget where we are purchasing equipment. We have also set up a networking system in our office that the staff had complained about for years. And the Nexus system is what we need to continue to provide services and the programming for the channels. And then we have also purchased some smaller computers. Let's see, I'm just going to, I really feel that, you know, as I look at the budget and where we're going, we can still survive even with the increases, but we may have to make some changes and cut back in a few areas. We'll have to see that. I haven't talked with the board yet about this because I just found out about this at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Okay. So what I see for Cheshire TV, I'm sorry?
Hang on just a second.
Sure.
Production manager there.
I need to apologize because I neglected to promote Jodi to a panelist status when she started, and I didn't want to interrupt, but I also didn't want to promote her without alerting her. So Jodi, do you mind if I promote you to panelist? Because we didn't discuss that before the meeting.
Not at all. Not at all. I was wondering if you were able to see me or not anyway. So
Well, you should be getting a request to join as a panelist, and you might need to turn on your video. I'm not positive.
Okay, just one sec.
My apologies to the committee and
that's okay.
And the chair and to Jodi.
There we go.
Cheshire
don't-
TV probably
Okay, I
knows
see
more
myself.
about this than I.
Okay. All right. I do see myself now. Okay. So in closing, what I see for Cheshire TV in our new staff, we have Peter Kelleher, Alex Fleming, and Otto Jesperson, as well as Rick Blood, who's been with us for 13 years. I feel that as we go along, you know, I've only been in this position for 3 months. As a board member, I've learned a lot. And in this 3 months, I have to tell you, I have learned a ton of information, which I can share with you or not, whichever you would like. But it has been quite an education about Cheshire TV. I'm very proud of the services that we offer, but there are some things that we need to do a little bit better. So building a stronger board is what I would like to see. I would like to see training with our board, mutual respect, goals, and transparency. A lot more transparency than we have seen from the previous board chair, as well as the executive director, from what I'm finding out now. I'd like to see our staff be well educated. We have little to none of the SOPs on how to run the station. So it's hard to run a station when you don't know all of the processes. We've done a very good job of what we can do. It's just that it would have been better in all cases in the board and on the staff to have something in writing so that we could pick up and go from there. So not very many SOPs. I would like to see positive training and cross training and a much better and stronger team atmosphere. Let's see, we have hired on an HR firm called Aptiva HR. They are helping us to interview our staff and find the needs, as well as determining the requirements that we see for our executive director now and in the future, as well as updates on our employee handbook. So we really feel that we will be taking a better stance and a stronger foundation for Cheshire TV. We will also be making up a calendar of all of our requirements, because what we're doing is we're looking through our bylaws, and a lot of it seems like it's about interpretation. Things have been done a certain way for a long time, but I don't see that in the bylaws. So what we're trying to do right now is evaluate what we actually should be doing. We see the bylaws and we're trying to follow them, but we keep being told that we are not following the bylaws. So we're doing the best that we can. And in the future, we plan to have a better plan than what we've had in the past. Let's see. So we've reviewed our bylaws over and over and over again, and our board is much better educated than we have ever been, I believe. In closing, let's see, from what I see, Lee Perkins never left Cheshire TV back in 2014 or 2015, or until we took him off from the Google email that we had that was supposedly going out to just our board. Mark Nelson and Tom Cook were aware that these emails were going out to Lee Perkins without the board's knowledge, or at least the present board's knowledge. We have focused on providing a quality service to our community. We encourage freedom of speech and support for everyone interested in learning more or volunteering with Cheshire TV. This is not a competition, but a tool for the community. And during COVID, we all need to feel connected. I've learned something about Cheshire TV, or something new, almost every day. I have asked myself why I am on the board and why I should care about Cheshire TV so much. But in my point of view, it's the right thing to do. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have that I may not have covered this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a difficult report to give. City Manager.
Thanks for that report, Jodi. I know it's been a really tough few months for you, and I just want to let the council know that Jodi has been very responsive to all of our questions, and anytime we received a complaint. The agreement that we have with Cheshire TV is one as a contract service. Section 11 in our agreement states that they are an independent contractor, so we do not have any oversight of their personnel or really their day-to-day operations. There are things in our contract that talk about deliverables and what we can expect for the money that's provided from the city of Keene. And so Jodi understands that. And I did have a few questions that I emailed today, and most of them are minor, but I will, I think that the financial questions while you're looking at your budget, also to take a look at the contingency and where that is in your you should be holding a 5% contingency fund, and I didn't see that separated in your financial statements. And then where your capital reserve is. Many of the other things are just updating information, and one of the things that we added to the contract last year was planning board and zoning board meetings, and that's something that I believe is happening now, but want to make sure because it wasn't referenced in the report. And then finally, just a question really about the auditor. Who is your auditor? And I don't know if you know that off the top of your head or not.
Yep, it's Rust and Company in Swansea. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, committee members, questions? Councillor Clark. You got to unmute yourself.
Sorry. I'm still not used to this darn thing. Jodi, thank you very much. You filled in a lot of blanks for me. And I understand that, turmoil in the past is past, and we really should be concerned about what's going on in the future. And so you need to understand the city needs to be concerned with how Cheshire TV serves city functions in what Elizabeth described as deliverables. And you seem to be clear on some of the steps that you need to take to bring Cheshire TV back to normal. But I think, the big gorilla in the room is, have you upgraded the Nexus for the two channels? Or are you still using the borrowed system? What's the status with that?
Right.
It's very, very important.
Yeah, it is very important, and we feel the same way. The Nexus had been ordered, or so we thought, and we followed up on it because it was supposed to be delivered within 4 to 6 weeks, and we were informed that they never received our signed contract, and that's disturbing because we should have had the Nexus in-house right now. We have contacted them, and they have told us now that it's going to be 4 to 6 weeks. So we will continue with the system that we have now. This is sort of beyond our control. We were under the impression that everything was signed and processed, and I believe our previous interim director was under that impression as well. Somewhere along the way, it got lost. I can't say how, but as soon as we can have that Nexus up, we are going to have that Nexus up.
Okay, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, if I can continue. Okay, I'm not going to ask you about the executive director and everything. So I'm sure that you're going to be electing one of those. Appointing one of those as soon as possible.
Right.
But let's talk about the modernization program that I guess we all assumed was in the making. Things like the PTZ cameras. That everybody seems to have that would make, the back shop during city meetings a lot more functional and a lot easier, and other upgrades that are actually in the budget last year. And I'm not really sure about the budget this year, whether or not those numbers, I'm not even really confident of those numbers actually, frankly. So if you could talk about the upgrades and what's being discussed right now, I appreciate it.
So I apologize, but I was not aware that we were supposed to have upgrades. I know that we, as a whole, should be upgrading our system all the time. But from what I saw, and it was never discussed at any board meetings that I came to while Tom Cook was the chair, about any kind of upgrades on equipment, which I feel is a travesty because Cheshire TV has equipment that can be used, but should have been updated long ago. And I'm just flabbergasted because we are now doing upgrades on our equipment. We are doing maintenance on our equipment. Maintenance had not been done for quite some time. So we are trying to take hold of some of the past problems. And as I said, I learn something every day. So I was not aware that that had been in the previous budget, but that should be a line item that we should be increasing and improving our systems at all times. I'm not saying that we should be wasting money. I think that we should be using our knowledge and planning ahead for the future. But those are things that we, as Cheshire TV, even before I was here, should have been planning on.
Okay, so as far as those upgrades, I would urge you to look to see where that money is that was set aside for those things. And they're probably in the budget. I haven't really looked it over really very closely, and frankly, it doesn't really go into much detail as I would like it to. But I appreciate your effort, and I wish you luck. And if there's anything that I can do, please reach out to me.
Thank you, Terry.
City Manager?
I did want to take the opportunity to let Jodi know that we have made several upgrades to council chambers.
Yes.
We have transferred to digital. We've changed our cameras all over. We've upgraded our PA system and gotten an encoder. So just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that, because we have gone through a substantial effort to upgrade council chambers.
Yes, and I understand this through Access AV, and I believe that Peter has been aware, and he's been working with Bill Dowd, I believe, on some of the upgrades as well. So I'm very happy to see that. We had some problems a few weeks ago, which were due to some upgrades through Microsoft, and these were taken care of. We are trying to plan ahead a little bit more in the future, in the sense of, from what we were told by one of our staff members, longtime staff member, that we only plan 2 days ahead on our channels, and that is not adequate. So we have made an effort to get that staff person to comply with what our request is. And so we're trying to do everything that we can to make sure that we are strong and that we don't have the problems that we could have in the with the systems. So, Elizabeth, and I'm sorry, Elizabeth, I did not receive your email today. So I don't know the other questions that you were going to ask.
No problem. I'll follow up with you tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Hooper?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was recently appointed by the mayor to represent the city with Cheshire TV. And so now I'm on board with Cheshire TV in that capacity. Just wanted really quickly to say I've got full confidence in Jodi as chair. Certainly it's a period of transition. It's a very difficult period. I think she's going to get the ship righted and move forward. And I agree with Councillor Clark in that we should not look back, we should look forward.
Yes.
Work with the getting things going with all of the missions, wonderful mission statement that you made. And so I certainly will try to support that as much as I can. And I think historically the city has been supportive, and wanted to work with you and the board in making Cheshire TV a very strong part of the community, which it has been in the past. I think it's extremely important to continue Cheshire TV so that people can participate in this access. And so thank you, Jodi, for your leadership.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Other members of the committee? Any councilors listening in? Public members? Councilor Clark?
Yes, so Jodi, we will be getting that audit report, and once you get your budget all squared away and make sure all the numbers are jiving right and everything, we're going to get a copy of that.
Yes.
For July and actually this quarter. I'd like to see it before the next quarter if we could.
Oh yeah, all we have to do is sign off on the documentation for the audited statement and review it with the board. So we should have it right after November 10th, which is our next board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Get a motion, please.
Councilor Powers, I think Assistant City Manager Rebecca Landry has her hand up.
Okay, well, chime in there because I can't see your hand or your face.
Can you hear me? This is Rebecca.
Can't hear you. Yes.
Okay. So thank you, Jodi Turner, for being here tonight. And thank you for the report. I have a question just out of curiosity. We've all sort of been forced to embrace some new video technology in the last 6 months. And I'm wondering if the level of familiarity we and others now have and a growing level of comfort we have with some of these new live streaming technologies, I wonder how you are thinking about or how that might affect Cheshire TV operations going forward.
Right. You know, the Cheshire TV is not the station that it was 15 years ago in the sense that technology has changed a lot since then. I remember when we started, we had these huge cameras and cassettes that we had to purchase every time. And now we have small cameras and SD cards and we're doing Zoom meetings. So I think that this is something that is important for our staff as well as the board to understand. And we have a pretty young staff, which means that they are up on a lot of the technology and the interests of people in our community. So I feel that what we need to do is talk with our membership, talk with our staff, and see where we need to go from here. So we talked about this a little bit at our annual meeting the other night, and we don't have anything specifically planned. Again, I've only been in this position for 3 months. We're just trying to make sure that we have everything going the way we need to. But this is a huge time for planning and future thoughts and knowing from where we came from and where we want to go. I don't want us to just jump into something. I want us to have a plan as to how we're going to get there and what our goals really are. So we've been meeting with our staff almost every week to make sure that everything is going well and to know what we need for staffing or equipment. And that is the plan, is to try to keep up on as much technology as we possibly can. It appears to me that we really haven't purchased a lot of upgrades over the past 5 to 7 years. So I hope that answers your question, Rebecca. I don't have any specifics for you, but that is one of our goals, is to evaluate where we need to go.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Hooper, motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Finance Organization and Personnel Committee moves to accept the Cheshire TV presentation by Chairman of the Board, Jodi Turner, as informational.
Terry Clark seconds.
Been moved and seconded. Further discussion by members of the committee? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Councilor Remy, yes.
Councilor Clark, yes.
Councilor Powers, yes.
And Councilor Hooper, yes.
All right, thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is FAA reimbursable agreement, and the airport director is with us somewhere.
He should be joining you momentarily.
By Zoom, huh? That's from the airfield. He's going to zoom in.
Yes.
You ready? I bounced off there for a little bit.
Yep, you're all set. If you would.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you remember, last month, the City Council authorized the city manager to accept several grants that will fund the different phases of the airport taxiway reconstruction and extension projects. One of those grants was to fund the work needed that we have to have done on our navigational systems that support our instrument landing systems, and that work has to be done by FAA technicians. So this agreement is with the FAA to pay those FAA technicians to do that work on that navigational equipment. And I did explain some of how that worked with the instrument landing system and the weather observation system, and then they have to fly a flight check afterwards to check that equipment after the work is done. So this is the agreement that goes with that grant money to get that work done as part of that project. So as such, we're asked that this committee move to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute this agreement with FAA. And I'll take any questions if you have them.
Okay, questions from members of the committee? Any counselors that are listening in? Members of the public? All right, hearing none, call for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee moves to recommend that the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute an agreement with the FAA to perform services required for the completion of the airport taxiway extension project.
Second. Councilor Clark.
Councilor Clark seconds, sorry.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion by members of the committee? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilor Remy, yes.
Councilor Clark, yes.
Councilor Powers, yes.
And Councilor Hooper, yes.
All right, thank you. Unanimous vote. And moving
Thank you.
on to the last item, get a verbal update, wastewater treatment plant power purchase project. I think the city manager wants to kick it off, and then we're going to give Court a few minutes to speak. And we do have one of our consultants available to speak to it too. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Chair. So the highlight of the evening, we have a solar project to discuss tonight. As you know, city's wastewater treatment plant is the largest energy user in Cheshire County. Back in November 2019, the city issued a request for proposals for a clean, renewable energy system to provide this power. We drafted an RFP in a way that it would encourage proposals for any type of clean, renewable system. It was not aimed exclusively at solar projects. However, the solar proposal from Revision did prove to be the most attractive option. And in June of 2020, the council authorized us to move forward and to negotiate a letter of intent, or an LOI, with Revision. As you know, legislation has been put forward many times to increase the net metering cap here in New Hampshire. We had hoped the cap would be increased back in 2019 to allow for the design of a larger system, which could provide more favorable rates. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but we decided to pursue a solar project up to the 1 megawatt cap, which would be enough power to offset the needs of the wastewater treatment plant. Without battery storage capability for this behind the meter power, we are forced to purchase and sell power back to Eversource during the times the sun isn't shining, but the plant is still running. We have a great team of staff at the city that's been working with Revision diligently since June to craft a project that will provide modest cost savings for the wastewater treatment plant and offset the facility's carbon footprint. The team included Public Works Director Court Blomquist, Assistant Public Works Director, Utilities Maintenance Manager Tom Moran, Assistant Public Works Director Duncan Watson, Community Development Director Rhett Lamb, and City Attorney Mullins. We evaluated the funding model for an outright purchase and construction of the array over both 20 and 15-year bonding scenarios, as well as the proposed power purchase option, which will allow the project to be built with the minimal capital outlay by the city, similar to the project built on Marlborough Street. A power purchase option with the potential of a buyout in year 6 is the recommendation this evening. Since the array is being built on airport land and the airport is a separate fund and the FAA won't let us go without paying a lease, we included in our analysis an approximate lease payment of $12,500 from the wastewater treatment plant to the airport each year. The airport director is pleased about that. In addition, due to some flooding issues in the area, which increased the cost of installation, it was necessary to also include an initial investment of $83,698 from the wastewater treatment budget to the project in year 1. In the analysis, we compared our known cost for electricity against the power purchase rate plus the cost of electricity we would still need to purchase during the hours the sun isn't producing, and the difference that we would sell back to the grid. We then added the cost of the new lease with the airport and added the initial investment of $83,698 in year one. Due to this initial cost, the first year of construction, we actually see an increase in expenses of $78,344. However, starting in year two, we begin to see a modest annual savings of just over $7,000, which improves over the term of the agreement. Without the inclusion of the airport lease, this would obviously be a much larger savings. Unfortunately, with the lease, we don't offset this initial expense until year 7 under our current conditions. This analysis doesn't include the possibility of increased electricity consumption with the potential addition of an electric sludge dryer that's currently considered in our CIP. At the end of the first 20 years, we will have conservatively saved just under $600,000 if we remain in the PPA or power purchase agreement. Starting in year 6, we have the ability to purchase the array at $1 million less than the original construction cost. We will need to evaluate bonding rates and current electric usage at that time to do an analysis of purchase versus continued operation under the power purchase agreement. Purchase at year 6, however, will provide an opportunity for much greater savings and a better analysis with real historical data. While I would have preferred a project with no upfront costs and greater savings, this project works. It will provide energy cost savings. It will provide the opportunity for even greater savings starting in year 6. If our electric usage increases with the addition of a sludge dryer, our costs will become even greater. This solar project locks in our electric price, which provides cost stability for the future. This project increases our resiliency by adding more locally sourced renewables to our overall energy portfolio, which is a draft recommendation in our energy plan. Tonight, we'll be looking to take the next step. And actually, at the end of this presentation, we're going to be requesting a motion from the council to negotiate and execute a power purchase agreement with a potential buyout starting in year 6. I'm going to turn it over to Dan Weeks from Revision Energy next to share additional information. And then both Dan and I, along with Court, are happy to answer questions that you may have. And I want to just, before turning it to Dan, I want to say that working with Revision has been great. We have had lots of meetings with Revision. We've had lots of meetings internally to make this project work. We've probably driven Dan crazy with all of our questions and every analysis we could come up with. And they have been very responsive, always upfront with information, and it made this process much easier. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to Dan.
Thank you so much, City Manager Elizabeth Dragon and Public Works Director Cord Blomquist, and the many other city personnel who we've been privileged to work with throughout this process. I do have some slides queued up. I'm not currently, don't currently have permission to share my screen. It says disabled screen sharing. If it's possible to.
Can we put that together for
him? We're working on it.
Thank you. Sometimes it's necessary to change the host, which I would certainly change right back if that's maybe one solution.
Councilor Remy.
Yeah, at the bottom of the screen, Beth, you should be able to, there should be a security. And if you click on that, there should be a button to allow screen sharing. At least in my version. I don't know if your version's the same. Only for the host.
Does that work?
If you click on Perfect. Thank you so much. Hopefully
Sorry.
You are not at all. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, again, my name is Dan Weeks. I'm a director at Revision Energy. It's been a real pleasure for me to work with several city personnel, Elizabeth and the entire team over the last year since we first prepared our response to this RFP. It's gone through multiple iterations. As Elizabeth articulated, there's been some policy uncertainty. I and Revision remain very involved in the policy process, and we're hoping for a slightly different outcome, although I can say that those efforts will continue in the new session. So there's the chance that what we're presenting tonight will become more favorable and that new opportunities will emerge. But I wanted to give just some brief background on who Revision is. This will be familiar to some of you since we were honored to be selected for the city's prior RFP at the Public Works building on Marlborough Street. But very briefly, although I'm our Director of Market Development, I'm proud to co-own this company with close to 300 fellow employees. We're 100% employee owned, and the majority of us are actually electricians and apprentices on the way to becoming electricians. So we take pride in building and engineering systems, as well as doing the design and sales and marketing and all the rest. So far, we've built close to 10,000 systems. I think we'll cross that mark at the end of this year across New England since we were founded in 2003, including numerous PPA projects. We're coming up to 50 projects for municipalities in New Hampshire, as well as another 100 PPA projects for nonprofits. A quick sampling, and I can get into these if you're interested, but we have been honored to work with a number of cities around the state. As I just mentioned, these are some of the larger projects that we've worked on in recent years, and some local businesses and nonprofit projects that I'm sure you're familiar with. We most recently cut the ribbon for the Badger Balm project up in Gilsum, a combination of ground and roof. Before that, the Filtrene manufacturing project, which some of you are familiar with, and a number of others in the area. So it's been an honor. I can say, as someone who grew up in the Monadnock area, was in Keene this afternoon where my brother lives. It's always a treat. I live in Nashua now, but it's always fun to come back home to the area and to get to collaborate with the city. For just a quick backstory on what you yourselves have done, thank you for the city's leadership on what are some of the most consequential and largest municipal projects to date in New Hampshire. The Public Works building there in Keene Ice on Marlborough Street is home as of the end of 2017 to a 643 kilowatt solar array. And I just pulled up a couple of quick stats from this afternoon. This is your monthly production going back since it was first turned on, end of 2018, not 17. So we've had almost 2 full years, and you can see naturally some variation month to month based on the weather, but we are happily on target to meet our production goals. And I would just pause for a moment. The city, part of what excites Revision about working with the city of Keene, we're a B corporation or a benefit corp that has as our mission helping the region transition to clean energy. The impact that you have had just at this one location on Marlborough Street with 1.7 million pounds of carbon pollution reduced so far, equivalent of 13,000 trees planted, and we can share some other stats if you'd like. But the city is certainly walking the talk in making good on the bold commitments that this council has made, and I thank you also on behalf of my kids for your leadership there. I did want to give a quick overview of what we're actually proposing at the wastewater treatment plant, and then have a couple of slides on the PPA financials, which the city manager has already outlined in some detail. And I'm glad that logged into the meeting is my colleague, our project manager, Steve Zubak, one of our electricians who has been on the ground even more than I. So if there are some particularly technical questions, I can call on him as well. So to rewind, at the start of the RFP, the city asked us to look at a couple of different locations that were identified in the RFP. The one to the north along the east-west runway would be a 3.2 megawatt system, not currently viable given the restriction of 1 megawatt in terms of state net metering regulations. But the one to the south, which would feed the existing load at the wastewater treatment plant, 1.3 megawatts, that's on the DC panel capacity side. It's 1 megawatt on the AC inverter side, which is the state regulation. So we're really taking full advantage of the state state requirement to cap it at 1 megawatt. While also sizing the array, it's happily coincides well with the existing load at the facility. So we will be able to produce just over 100% of last year's load, and right about 100% if you average the previous few years. We've certainly spent a good bit of time on site, the area which I'll show you in a little bit more close up, but this is the field and a couple of acres of wooded area just to the north of the wastewater treatment plant. Your existing switchgear is certainly up to snuff in terms of what we need to interconnect. So that allows us to have a more efficient solar installation. The airport master plan did actually designate the area that we are proposing for solar development. We had looked at some other locations to the east of the wastewater treatment plant, a little bit nearer to the runway, ran into some setback issues after a fair amount of vetting. But as you can see here, the kind of center yellow-green highlighted area, this was identified in the master plan as the airport director, Dave Hickling, who we've also enjoyed working with, has explained to us for the development of non-aviation projects with solar as one of the named purposes. So we're glad to have that already. We've spent a fair bit of time already investigating the FAA requirements and working with a consultant, but this is a major hurdle that it has already been designated for the purpose. What we are proposing here is a 1.36 megawatt solar array directly north of the plant. On the next map here, you can see we did already have our environmental engineering partner, Horizons Engineering, come out and do the floodplain designation and mapping. The lighter colors are deeper floodplains. This is an AE 100-year floodplain that much of the array sits in. The colored areas, the gray background is outside of the floodplain. This is something we uncovered rather recently in the process. And so, as Elizabeth mentioned, that did add a bit more complexity to an already fairly complex project. But we have been spending a fair bit of time just in the last week doing due diligence with our racking manufacturer to determine what the price impact is to raise the array to the necessary height from a leading edge or drip edge of 3 feet above the ground to as high as 6 feet above the ground in certain areas. And so we've been able to incorporate that. A little bit of the engineering design just gives you a sense of the monthly production of the array. But a little more interesting here is how that relates to the historic consumption at the plant. As you can imagine, a wastewater treatment plant has fairly steady load. The need for processing waste is consistent throughout the year. Solar, of course, peaks in the summer months. So as Elizabeth spoke to, there will be a fair amount of the solar generation that will not coincide with instantaneous demand at the plant. At those times, we will net meter the power, sell it to Eversource, and it will, in real time, the electrons will flow to the airport hangars, the airport terminal, and even out to the street to feed neighboring businesses and homes. So a kind of power plant helping the neighborhood meet its energy needs during times of peak demand, namely summer afternoons. And then in the winter months, as well as at night and on rainy days, the plant will continue to purchase power from the grid. And we've spent quite a bit of time doing that analysis, given a lot of data that we were able to collect with the city's help from the utility. And this just gives you the last several years of consumption at the plant. I would applaud the city on a number of efficiency measures that have been taken at the plant. Aaron and the team there have I know, been innovating. And so you can see the load, the consumption has come down. As Elizabeth mentioned, there are contemplated plans to add a dryer, which would add an estimated 900,000 kilowatt hours of load, a very substantial increase on the order of 60% additional load. That would actually help in terms of the solar economics, because the more power that is used behind the meter, so to speak, that is in real time when it is generated, the greater the energy value, because you offset the full retail cost of electricity rather than having to sell that excess power to the grid at a reduced net metering rate. So that is a positive development that may be coming down the line. And just a quick snapshot of what the environmental impact would be for this array. I won't go through all of these numbers, but for me, as a guy who grew up in the Monadnock Woods, the idea that although we would have to take down approximately 3 acres of forest on an annual basis, this would have the carbon sequestration equivalent of more than 800 acres of forest, I think is a positive for the environment. And frankly, this project simply wouldn't happen without the city's leadership. New Hampshire is a challenging market. There are a number of policy hurdles that have kept our solar penetration here below 1%, whereas in our neighboring states, it is at 15% and beyond. So for cities to take the lead, even though the savings on the near term are not significant, are frankly very, very minimal. But the city's leadership here makes projects possible that would not otherwise be possible with substantial long-term savings available. Just a quick kind of real-life view, a similar project installed. The inverters that convert your raw DC power to AC, which will feed the building, are mounted there at the array. Power is piped back to the building, and then a quick glimpse of a recently installed, fully installed array. So that's a quick overview of the design and engineering. Happy to take any questions as I go, but really the second and maybe key part for you as counselors is the financial impact. I think the city manager did a very good job of reviewing what that is. So I'll give just a few quick highlights. And please pardon me, I did borrow this slide from the city of Nashua, which is also going to their second phase of projects right now. But the two key parties are of course, City of Keene, in your case, and Revision's impact investor partner. The reason for this PPA or power purchase agreement structure is because the existing solar incentives are directed through the tax code, meaning that any municipality or nonprofit entity that doesn't pay income taxes to the IRS does not have any ability to take advantage of those incentives. For that reason, we are fortunate to have investors, including some families right there in Keene and elsewhere in the Monadnock area, who do have the tax liability and who share our mission of seeing more solar deployed. We were able to enlist them for the Marlborough Street project and plan to do so again here so they can take the tax credits. That is how we're able to, 5 years later, reduce that buyout price from roughly $2.6 million, the initial build cost, to roughly $1.6 million in year 6, passing on those tax incentives. And during those first 5 years, the city commits to buying the power generated by the array. It is then the city's choice whether or not, starting in year 6, you will buy it out. And it's something, as Elizabeth said, that you'll want to evaluate based on current bond markets and other factors, whether it makes sense. We've assumed that you would bond it. We've taken current bond rates in our financial analysis to give what I think is a reasonable picture of the future financials. But in that situation, the city would be cash flow positive throughout the life of the project with more substantial savings down the road. I won't go through all of these numbers unless you'd like to go in more detail. And we have much more detailed spreadsheets that we can share as well. But a quick comparison, the status quo, we have your current unit cost of electricity plus your demand charges. So a total cost at the DPW for the full year 2019 of about $183,000. And then the after solar scenario is a little more complicated in New Hampshire because you're continuing to buy power at times when the array isn't producing. You're continuing to pay demand charges, although somewhat less because the solar does reduce the amount of demand on utility power. You'll be purchasing the power that is generated by the array through the PPA, using a portion of it, selling a portion of it back to the utility, and then realizing some capacity reduction revenue as well. So when we put all those pieces together, not at the moment looking at the lease matter and the upfront site costs, the savings in this scenario come to just about $6,700 starting in year 1, and that does increase thereafter. We did model several different scenarios. This is just one of them, where the city has the option to cover the additional site prep costs when we encounter the issue of the floodplains and some other site challenges. That can also be added to the PPA, so there is no upfront cost, in which case the PPA rate is a little bit higher. The numbers at the bottom are when we take a conservative model and use the government projections on utility inflation, incorporate the cost of O&M if the city was to choose to have Revision provide those services for the full 25-year warranty period and the full 40-year lifespan. We build in the degradation of the panels, losing about 0.5% per year in their production. So when we put all these factors together, the projected savings come to around $3 million over the 25-year warranty period if you exercise the buyout option. Again, it's an option. It can be deferred to a later year if you choose. And then if you carry it all the way out to 40 years, it's about $8 million in projected savings. And just a quick representation, this is with that buyout scenario. If you were to continue, your worst case scenario, so to speak, would be the light blue line where you just continue the PPA, so don't incur a capital cost, just buy the power under that power purchase agreement. Lower savings, so recommended that you do own your power when it works for the city to do so. But then over the long term, the savings do add up. In a final quick representation, the city manager made this point, but having some predictability about future electricity costs can be helpful for budgeting and planning purposes. On the right side, we have the current utility costs and then the projected costs when we apply the government's inflation projection for New Hampshire electricity rates. So that would be over the life of the array, about 14.7 cents would be your average unit cost. Through the PPA, it's possible to lock in a much lower rate when we factor in the initial payments, the buyout in year 6 or at a later point, and then the generation thereafter. So for the portion of your power coming from solar, roughly 1.7 million kilowatt hours per year, that long-term rate over the system life comes to about 4 cents per kilowatt hour. That's really the overview. I can give some more background on Revision's impact investing program. I just wanted to include a few kind of feel-good slides here at the end. We were honored to work with the city on the unveiling of the Marlborough Street Array a few years ago, and to host Senator Shaheen earlier this year over the summer at that array. Certainly, any opportunity we can partner with you to help tell the story, to let the state and region know about the city's leadership. We see that brings more interest and expands solar adoption. EV charging, other modes of community engagement, we would be very glad to provide if that's of interest. And of course, the student engagement, community engagement through things like monitoring displays at City Hall or somewhere else, a website, which we will often create for the community. You may have seen this at the DPW building, for example. And just a final quick note, we are fortunate to have an in-house apprenticeship program and are always looking to connect with communities because we do see a lot of workforce opportunities. So if in the future we have an opportunity to present to students at Keene High School or otherwise be engaged in the community, please count us as willing partners. We really want to engage and add local jobs and economic development. I think that about wraps it up, but happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you again for the time.
Okay, we're going to have to get the screen sharing back to the host.
Yes.
And then all right. Councillor Clark.
Thank you. Thank you, Dan. That was a great presentation. You've pretty much covered it all, but I do have one question, and you probably had an answer for. But is the footprint going to be pollinator friendly, or is it just going to be grass that's going to have to be maintained?
Thank you, Councillor Clark. We hope very much so. That is something we've done, planting pollinator habitats with the appropriate local blend of grasses and wildflowers. So we've done it for other arrays. We haven't, I admit, gotten into those finer details just yet. There's been some other fun complexities that we've worked through, but that is certainly the intention. One thing, for instance, that we do is, although a security fence will be installed around the perimeter, which does limit movement through the immediate array of larger mammals, we typically leave about 3 inches on the base so that smaller animals, rodents, all the wild critters that we want to continue to use that habitat can do so. And certainly birds and other, and all the pollinators are welcome and are, you can't quite see it at the badger photo, but we do have actually they have a number of beehives right next to pretty much in the array, and a nice mix of wildflowers there. And it's something we definitely want to continue with the city.
Councilor Hooper, please.
Thank you. A great presentation, Dan. I don't know if I direct this to you or to the city manager, but with the plan for the array, how does this work with the fence proposal by the FAA to put around the airport for protection of keeping animals off the runways? Has that been discussed? It looks like from the map that I saw that it would not affect that, but I just wanted to make sure if I could get an answer on that, please.
Yes, it has been discussed. It would not affect that. The fence project is further out.
Okay, thank you, City Manager.
Other city councilors who might be listening in? Members of the public? Okay. City Manager, you wanted to move this project along, so you have a motion, I believe?
I do. The proposed motion would be for the Finance Organization Personnel Committee recommend the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute a power purchase agreement with Revision Solar for the installation and maintenance of a solar array on the grounds of the DeLaunt Hopkins Airport to provide renewable energy for City of Keene wastewater treatment plant, including an option to purchase the array on or after year 6 of the agreement.
Councilor Hooper, that was your motion, was it not?
That's a great motion, City Manager, and I'm looking for a second.
I'll second that.
I'm sure you will, Terry. Thank you very much. So any further discussion by members of the committee? All right, this is a great step forward. So roll call vote, please.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Chair. We have someone in the attendee with their hand up.
Okay.
Peter Hansel.
All right, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I got my hand raised probably a little bit too late for you, but I was trying to figure out where that was. This is Peter Hansel. I'm calling from my home in Keene, and I'm the current vice chair of the Energy and Climate Committee and the chair of the Community Power Committee. I've worked a lot with Dan Weeks. I'm glad to see this project is going through revision. I'm not authorized to speak on behalf of either of the committees that I'm on, so I'm speaking as a private citizen. But I do have a couple of comments. I've been on several sides of this type of a project before. Dan mentioned some of the investors that have gotten involved in projects. One of the first ones that I got involved with was the food co-op, the Monadnock Food Co-op, where some local investors helped provide the financing for that project so that those investors could take advantage of the tax incentives and keep the costs down for the Monadnock Food Co-op to be able to afford to build that array and to allow them to purchase it after 6 years, the same kind of a proposal that's being offered here. The temptation is always to wait until there's a better time to do something. The first array I put on my house was in 2009. I think the costs of that array are probably twice what they would be today, if not more. So it's always tempting to say, well, what would happen if I wait another year? Maybe the governor will, or maybe the legislature will approve a higher net metering cap. But there's never a better time. Our climate can't wait. There are incentives that are available this year that are going to get less next year, so those would impact the cost of this project. Those incentives, Keene can't take advantage of those incentives, but they're factored into the fact that Revision Energy can, and those cost savings will be passed on to the PPA project. So the other comment is that things are changing. Somebody mentioned the fact that if battery technology comes along where those extra kilowatts that are generated during the daylight can be saved for nighttime operation. So that's a technology that's rapidly evolving and could affect, if something were able to be put onto this project in the years to come, that could easily affect the economics of this whole thing and make it so those in front of the meter costs were saved for your own use. And the other thing is that with our drafting of the energy plan for the city, we are going to be relying more, as much as we can, on what can be produced in our city to try and meet our goals. It's easy to say, well, we can all do it by a community power agreement, but even that, we're going to be still looking for what we can produce locally. We're making great strides on increasing the number of solar production that's occurring in Keene. It's amazing how much has happened in the last 10 years. But this would be the largest, and it would set an example not only for what's happening in our region, but also for the state to point to what is possible. So the time is now. I just encourage you not to put it off. I know it's a tough time of year and a tough time in our history to think about these kinds of things with what we're facing with COVID and so forth. But the time is ripe to take advantage of what's out there and what's available for us. So I just encourage you to go forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee members, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion by the committee? All right. Roll call vote, please.
Councilor Remy, yes.
Councilor Clark, yes.
Councilor Powers, yes.
Councilor Hooper, wholeheartedly yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Unanimous vote. A lot of business this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Court.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, before Dan leaves, I have a very quick philosophical question for him, if the chair will indulge me. Given the proliferation of large solar arrays that are now capable of providing a lot of electricity directly to large users, do you think in the future Thomas Edison was actually right and George Westinghouse, is going to be lost in the dust?
The circuit wars. Well, that's a longer conversation, sir, but I'd love to have it. How's that for punting?
Just curious about what you would think.
Well, Tom, you can think of it this way. You wouldn't have to have converters.
That's right.
HVDC is coming, sir.
All the engineers speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had to ask him that question.
Yeah, you're
Thank you
just
so
looking
much.
for an electric motorcycle. That's what you're looking for.
True.